Welcome to Gen Z Hoops, the Gen Z basketball, coaching, and sports business show. On this podcast, you'll learn from professional players, coaches, and executives from all over the world and see the court in a brand new way. And now, joining you courtside, your Gen Z host, John Hartofilis.
Hey, Coach Brandon, what's going on?
Nothing much. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm really excited to have you. And I know we spoke a little bit off air about how excited we both are to record this episode. So, I mean, just your both your journey going through to get to where you are now is so cool. I can't wait to talk about it.
Thank you.
Awesome. So, just to get us started, can you kind of give us a rundown on kind of what got you involved in this whole, whether it's strength and conditioning, the athletic training field? What got you interested and what made you choose that field for yourself?
I was the classic sports where everything, live, breathe, basketball. Even though actually in high school, I was mainly a track guy, and same thing in college. But I go home as soon as I get done with practice and play basketball until the lights came on and had to go inside and everything. So I knew that I didn't want any job other than sports. And so there was a dude at my church that was an athletic trainer at a local high school. And my mom kind of talked to him and was like, hey, can you talk to my son? He doesn't know what he wants to do. He just knows he only wants to do sports. That's the only option. And so I went and shadowed him for a day and had a lot of fun, saw what he did. And I was like, okay, maybe I could do this. And that was kind of what sent me down the rabbit hole and set me up. Strength conditioning really had no want to do it, really. No interest, really. It was just that I got my CSCS just because I could, coming out as an athletic trainer. And the first job I took, they didn't have a strength coach. And I ended up, one of my athletes actually found out that I had my CSCS and was like, hey, can you start training me? And I trained him. And then that brought the rest of the starting five of the basketball team and then the rest of the basketball team and so on and so forth. It kind of snowballed. And at the end of that year, I knew that I was going to be leaving and he was transferring out. And I was giving a ride home from practice one day. And he was like, man, I see how much fun you have in the weight room. You ever think about doing that? Yeah. And it kind of struck a chord in my head. And so even though I went and I got my master's in athletic training, the whole time I had already decided I was going to be a strength coach. And so I was doing all my projects on strength conditioning and stuff like that. And that was kind of the beginning of the switch.
That's awesome. And it's so cool to hear about what got you interested in it. When you brought up your CS, it got me thinking, because when I saw your LinkedIn, I saw all the certifications you had, and it was crazy to think about it. Like, I was kind of curious as to what like that path looks like academically to kind of get where you are, in terms of, if you could explain to our viewers that might want to do something like that in the future, what kind of needs to get done in order to chase that dream.
So, I mean, the way I did it wasn't exactly the straightest path to get there. Like, you definitely don't need the athletic training certification, or especially now that athletic training is a master's only degree. So it's even less attainable. You really just need to technically you just need to graduate from college with something to get your CSCS. But really what you should have is probably a background in either exercise science. Athletic training is great. It gives you a super deep background, probably, more than most strength coaches are going to have. But like I said, that requires an extra 2 years on top of that school-wise. So really you need exercise science. You could go with something like, I know different places have coaching degrees, and also you could probably get away with physical education, but having that kinesiology background is really big. So then CSCS, you sit for that. That's through the NSCA. That's probably the most widely accepted certification for strength coaches. You also have CSCCA is another one that's gaining traction if you get a job more in the college setting that is more specifically geared toward that. And they also have NHSCCA, which is geared toward high school. So you could go any one of those routes. There's a lot of other certifications out there, but most of those are more satisfactory for someone who's doing personal training or private stuff. If you're trying to get hired by any organization, I would recommend just get the CSCS, because everybody's going to take it. Versus, having to pick and choose employers like that. And then strength conditioning it's almost become a little bit oversaturated with people. So you're going to want to do some sort of, if you're in college and you're interested, intern with the sports programs that are already there. Go talk to your strength coaches. Even if you're not an athlete there, go talk to your strength coaches there, try to intern with them, try to do some shadowing, because a lot of times people are going to look at your resume and say, well, you were at, X university, you're at Florida State University, you had this great strength coach there. Why didn't you ever intern under him? Throw this resume in the trash. So get your internship in, and hopefully that internship will lead to some graduate assistantship opportunity, because most places are looking for you to have a master's. Master's wise, it doesn't really matter what you get it in a lot of times. Obviously there's masters that could help propel you along knowledge wise a lot better versus just getting like an MBA or something like that. But what you're using your master's for is to get that graduate assistantship, get 2 more years of work experience on your resume, where you're actually getting to work with teams and not just being underneath people. And then you may have opportunities in the field to be able to get a job.
That advice is just absolute gold, and it's exactly what we're looking for on this show, in terms of if someone's listening and they even have an inkling of an interest in doing what you do, that advice is fantastic. And it's also interesting because I didn't notice how, like, when you said your path was a little unconventional, you were just the 3rd athlete in your school's history to graduate from the sports medicine and athletic training program, and then after that, I also saw how you just have had so many different experiences, whether it's in player development roles, internships, strength and conditioning roles. What did all those experiences in terms of having all those different, whether it's working in different colleges or different organizations, kind of help you in getting to where you are now with the Canton charge?
It really set me up really well, especially for the position that I'm in right now. So with Canton, I was the first full-time strength coach that they had. And so it was a newly created position. And same thing with our athletic trainer. He was the first team-owned full-time athletic trainer as well, because up to that point, the G League and before that, the D League was more so using interns and hired help from the hospital programs and stuff like that. You didn't really have a sports performance department so much for your G League team. So for me, it set up really well, because I had come from, at the lane where we built the athletic training program from scratch. We didn't really have anything there. So having background experience of that, even though it was athletic training, to actually have not just the coaching part of it, but the administrative role of actually having to piece together a department, was a really good piece for me getting ready for this. My time under Mike Bewley when I was at Georgia Tech, with him, and then later on under Dan Schaefer at Florida State, both those guys were huge technology guys. And that was another big thing is they bring me in and say, okay, well, we think it's really cool that you've got experience with just about every sports science technology, under the sun. So that stuff set me up as well, was, doing work with that in the past. And then obviously in the NBA and the G League, it's a little bit different than college, where in college, yeah, you have all these blue chip guys, but you're not paying them X number of dollars. So these guys here, injury prevention and keeping these guys healthy just goes to another level in terms of investment. So a lot of NBA teams really do like that dual certification, coming from that background, knowing that you have a lot of history, not just with the training of athletes, but with the medical side as well. So that also set me up really well.
It's fantastic. And if anyone has any questions to me ever about anything related to strength and conditioning, I'm going to send them this episode immediately, because there's no better way for me to explain anything to them than for them to hear you talk about it. So that's great. And obviously with Canton, I noticed you guys have had a lot of call-ups recently. It must be up there in terms of everyone, the other teams in the G League. I saw that there were a lot in the last season to 2 seasons. Can you kind of talk a little bit about some of the call-ups that maybe you were exceptionally proud of, and guys that you had worked with that you really felt deserved to go to that next level?
Yeah, the team we had last year was just amazing. Like I don't have a complaint about a single guy on the team. But the one guy that I'll give a special shout out, Marquise Bolden, just got called up, actually just got converted to a 2-way for us this year after being a regular G League guy for us last year. And, I give him all the props in the world, not just because of how hard he worked, because I'm not trying to trash him, but he didn't come in like that. Day one, he was doing what was asked of him, but he wasn't already a way above and beyond guy when he walked in the door. And he very much became that over the course of the season. And just to watch him grow was unbelievable. I watched him right in front of my eyes go from very much a college kid to a pro's pro. And so that was really cool, to see him have that success. Obviously, Dean Wade, we're super, super proud of for him getting converted to a full contract. Dean was fantastic for us. Levi Randolph, had him both years, and he was another one that was really cool to watch him. His first year, he was coming off some injuries and stuff like that. And Levi is extremely pros, has been all over the map and is fantastic to work with. So he was great because we were able to see him go from just getting back from injured Levi to fully in his bag Levi. So he goes from, kind of gimping around and being a great player, but not being able to do everything that he used to be able to do. And, by the end of, year two, he's out here dropping 47 points on New York and stuff like that. So he's another guy I obviously want to give a big shout out to, because those three guys were great. And then two guys that I want to give shout outs to also that deserve it is my bench mob guys, Alex Stein and Alan Herndon. Two guys that our team was so deep, and so playing time could get really spotty. And it's hard sometimes to be a guy that gets pushed out of the rotation and is trying to get in. And those guys, were just incredible. They took it right on the nose and said, okay, well, if you're not going to put me in, then I'm going to work twice as hard. And they did that. 7 days a week, these guys were seeing me and killing it. So big props to them as well.
That's so cool, and I can't wait to see the noise these guys make with the Cavs this season. When especially the two-way guys when they get called up as the season progresses, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. One player in particular that I was really interested in, I think you might have heard me talk about him in the episode with Coach Tabaldi, was Sir Dominick Pointer. I don't know if you remember, because my whole story with him is, I'll make it brief, is that he's the first person I ever saw dunk on someone. I was 13 years old at the Garden, and he was playing for St. John's at the time and threw it on Gonzaga center. But he's someone that until Coach Tabaldi came on, I didn't know about what he was doing in the G League in terms of being the first player ever to have 80 steals and 80 blocks in a short, and especially in a shortened season. So can you talk a little about him, because athletically he's a freak of nature, and I'm sure you definitely noticed that when you were working with him.
Yeah, so Dom is like we all refer to him as a defensive savant. Like, he does things defensively that I haven't seen anybody else do. Like, he's one of the few players that he dictates what happens offensively, defensively versus reacts to it. And he's an awesome guy. Dom is a whole lot of fun. He gives me more gray hairs than anybody, but he also probably gives me more smiles than anybody too. So love Dom. Athletically, he's different. He's different. His 1 foot jumping ability is really special. Like, his ability to get off the ground quickly is really special. He actually doesn't have anywhere near the highest vertical on the team. He doesn't have any of the highest specs, but the one thing that we track is called RSI mod, which is basically a measurement of how quickly you get off the ground versus how much time you spend in the air. So it's not necessarily the highest jumping guys are going to have the highest RSA mods. It's going to be the guys who I call it have the most functional ability to jump in game. And so he's always been one of the guys who his vertical's been, middle of the pack, maybe an upper part of the pack, but his RSI mod has always been very, very close to the top. So he's a very special athlete, but I think part of what makes him so good is the way he sees the game defensively is so advanced. It makes all his reactions look twice as quick because he knows what's going to happen 10 minutes ago. So, he's a special dude.
That's so cool to think about. And when you brought up that idea of functional athleticism, I really enjoy that, because it's something I've only heard very briefly, actually, but it's an idea that's so interesting in terms of how someone could be a better athlete than someone maybe on paper, or maybe let me rephrase that. They might be a better athlete when you see them just jump up or in layup lines. But when the game starts, it's the guys that are functionally athletic that can use that to get to spots and make plays that have more success. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, you described it perfectly, which is basically, a vertical jump is different. A max vertical jump is different than the jump that you're going to be doing in game. So, for example, like, one thing we do in training a lot is I'll have the guys do gathers that they're not comfortable with. So maybe you're a 2 foot jumper and you usually go right, left jump. We'll also train our left, right jump. And the whole thing that we talk about is it's embarrassing because you jump terribly compared to your regular self when you do these opposite gathers and stuff like that. But the more variety of ways you can get off the ground, the more variety of situations you can get off the ground in game. And I think it's Paul Fabregas talked about some of the greatest jumpers he had seen. He was talking about Derrick Rose. And one of the things he said with him was Derrick Rose didn't have the highest vertical. And same thing with Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan didn't have the highest vertical at the combine. But the biggest thing was those guys could put up the same vertical they put up at the combine in game, off the dribble, off a lob. It didn't matter the situation. They could always jump the same height. And so that's what we talk about functional athleticism, is being able to provide yourself with different options to display your athleticism in game, depending on what the defense is giving you.
Wow, that's incredible. And it's crazy to think about how someone might have a 48-inch vertical jumping up, but that's the only way they can get those 48 inches. But the guy that can get 42 off the side, maybe against contact, those are the guys that end up having more success. And people really would just look at the numbers and say, oh, wow, he has a high vertical, he's a great jumper, when there's so many more layers to that. And that's so interesting.
Yeah, I mean, me and Levi have talked about this a lot, and I doubt he'll mind me saying this online, because he's done. That's one of the areas he's improved the most. Is over the course of his 2 years, his vertical only probably went up 1 or 2 inches, but that statistic that I talked about, RSI mod, has over doubled since 2 years ago. And wow, one of the things you can look at is his number of in-game dunks has gone up so significantly. That the thing I always say is guys who aren't functionally athletic are great fast break dunkers, but never give you anything else. The guys who are functionally athletic, those are the guys punching it on people, out of a half court set. And if you look at, highlight tapes of Levi, he doesn't have a lot of those until late last season. And then it was all season this year, so that's, that's that functional athleticism right there.
That's so cool. And then we kind of got off that point on some of the guys that you've seen with the Charge, but who's someone maybe that you haven't mentioned that you're kind of surprised hasn't gotten called up yet, and you're really excited to see what happens this coming season?
Sheldon Mack, for sure. Mack is a super bucket. Like, he's different, super different. And I mean, obviously, like, he's been in the league before. He had his injury that took him out for a while, so he's trying to get back. I thought he might get some opportunities last year. He dropped like 40 off the bench, I think, on Timothy Luwawu. Thought that was going to blow up. He had this string of crazy games. I thought for sure someone was going to give him a chance. But maybe he just needed more time to be able to build his resume back up for scouts, because obviously they know who he is. He was solid his rookie year. But I think that he'll be a guy that, now that he's fully healthy, because last season was his first season coming off a 2-year layoff with his Achilles. So if he could do that, we saw him, and I don't know if BT mentioned him at all, but we really saw him every single week. We saw Matt get better and better and look more and more like himself. So now that he's had a full off season, a full season of playing, I think he's going to just absolutely obliterate people this year.
That's great. And then in terms of, obviously you've seen all these guys put the work in, but I'm curious as to kind of what you do when it comes to that. And I've heard you talk on another show about why basketball players should squat. And I'm curious to hear if you could talk a little about that now, in terms of what are some of the functional movements that you really prioritize them doing, and the squat obviously being one of them.
We're not doing anything super complicated. It's the big patterns. So the squat is one of your big basic patterns. The hip hinge. So whether you use the RDL, the good morning, single leg RDL, all those are in that same family. So we're going to do some variation of that all the time. We're going to do some variation of a pull up or a row or something like that. Like I said, we're not doing anything super earth shattering that nobody's ever heard of. It's just that I want them to do everything extremely well. So as long as we can hit those big patterns and do them really, really well and really, really cleanly, then we're moving forward. And then what we do that's, just kind of our specific way of doing things is we sit down and we evaluate the guys and we talk with the guys early in the year and kind of establish 2 or 3 areas that are very specific targets for us to work on. So whether it's, a guy has limited ankle mobility, or a guy has terrible hamstrings, or whatever it is. And those 2 or 3 areas we'll hit almost every day. We'll try to do something to address those areas. And then as a team, we'll look at what's one area that we struggle with. So glute activation is like a popular one. So guys don't know how to use their glutes well. So that's something that we'll then build into the warm up even before practice and games and stuff like that.
Of course, that's definitely so key. And when it comes to you spreading this knowledge, I've seen that you have a couple of resources on the internet where you've tried to do that, whether it's with Kinesthetic Genius in your blog or Coach B's Exercise Library on YouTube. Went through a bunch of the videos and actually learned a lot from trying some stuff out. So what does that kind of look like for you in trying to make content and spread that knowledge outside of that?
Honestly, I need to do it more. It's pretty much every time that it happens, it's because I'm on the road and I'm trapped in a hotel room for a while, and I'm like, man, I'm really bored. I need to do something. I may as well make some content. So I need to do a better job of doing that, because I think that especially basketball is still kind of young in strength and conditioning. Like, we're, as a sport, it's not using strength and conditioning coaches to the highest level they can, especially when you talk about with younger athletes. Like, there's still a lot of myths and still a lot of people who are scared it's going to make them too bulky or stiff or yada, yada, yada. And so that's something, I've having worked in high school before, that's something I am passionate about, is trying to dispel a lot of that and just get out there, the main things that people need to be touching on. And for me, it's so big. I just want to see people do things well. Like I said it about my guys with the peak at high school, is like, you don't even need anything that special. If you can just do the main things really, really well, then you're going to be setting yourselves up for success. And then you can sprinkle in the cool stuff later.
That's great. Of course, as long as you're set up for success, the cool stuff, it'll all come into play later. And can you kind of let listeners know what the best ways for them to kind of follow up on what you're doing? Because honestly, I really hope you do keep on producing more content, because especially with the pandemic, that's kind of what birthed this podcast. But it'd also be, even over the next few months, great for you to, if you kept on making more videos, people like me or obviously other much more better athletes would learn a lot from it.
So I mean, on Instagram, I'm semi-active. Coach B 133 is my handle on there. On YouTube, I think it's Brandon Joyner, Coach, in parentheses, Coach B 133. Those are the two main places that I post stuff. Kinesthetic Genius, I update like once a year. So that's something that I may write a little bit more for. I've thought about contributing on some other websites as well. But really, Instagram and YouTube are the two best places with me. And then I'm supposed to be doing some stuff with Gatorade, I think, coming up here in this next year. So may have a little bit of content coming out with them as well.
Oh, I saw that. I didn't know if that was tied to the YouTube channel, if that was a separate thing. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, that was a separate thing. So Gatorade is a main partner of the NBSCA, the strength conditioning organization for the NBA. And so that was a task that they kind of asked of us when the pandemic hit. They said, hey, we need to keep our viewers engaged and give them something to do at home. So they reached out to us and asked the strength coaches around the league to make some stuff for them. And then, I plan to continue that with them past the pandemic and keep that relationship open.
Of course, that's so cool. And Coach Brandon, thank you so much for coming on. This was great. I mean, in terms of actual valuable knowledge for anyone interested in your field, this episode was absolutely full of it. So thank you so much for that.
Oh, I appreciate you having me on.
Awesome.
Thanks for listening to Gen Z Hoops. Make sure to follow, like, and subscribe on Instagram, LinkedIn, and all major social media platforms at Gen Z Hoops. You can tune in and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and every other podcast platform on the planet. Get ready for the next episode.